12th episode of Porcini Cuisine. Tonight we got a great rustic meal plan for you. We're going to make a potato gnocchi from scratch, and we're going to have that served with a sauce of butternut squash, porcini mushroom, and sage. This is a dish that Dorothy and I first got introduced to when we traveled to Italy a number of years ago, actually in Calabria. By the time we found our way to Rome and we rented a flat and did some cooking on our own, we decided, heck, let's duplicate this, or try to duplicate this dish, which we did successfully. And from time to time, we make this at home as well. It's one of our very favorite dishes that we can have. You can serve this with any pasta, but tonight we're going to make gnocchi from scratch. So anyways, let's start cooking. So the first thing we're going to do tonight is prepare our gnocchi dough. And for this, as I mentioned, I think in the intro, you can actually make just a ricotta and flour version. You can make it with a traditional pasta dough, but we're going to make this with some russet potatoes. So I've already boiled off 3 russet potatoes and got them all chopped up here. So I'm going to begin the process by using a device called a ricer. So all a ricer is, it's this little handy device here, and it's got holes in the bottom. What we're going to do is we're going to load it up. We're going to rice the potatoes onto our pastry board here as the first step in the process. So I want to get some flour on the board to begin with so nothing really sticks here. The potatoes are still warm, they're not hot, but they are a bit warm. So I'm going to go ahead and spoon these in. They're all done nicely here. Don't want to fill it up too much. And essentially this little device, you just push them through and you'll see out the bottom here how the potatoes get riced onto the pastry board. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to complete this process until all the potatoes are done as our first step. Okay, so we've got our 3 potatoes riced up here. And just a little bit of information about the potato selection. We used a russet potato, which I think in the UK they call this a floury, F-L-O-U-R-Y potato. It's got a higher starch content, so it's actually much better for a pasta mix like we're making tonight. And so that's all riced up. Now to this I'm going to add some ricotta cheese. So I've got 75 grams. It's about 1/3 of a cup of ricotta cheese. So I'm just going to kind of put this into the mix here. Mix it up a little bit. Spread it around a bit into our mix until we got the ricotta all mixed up inside here. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time, see if I can get that all incorporated nicely. And what we're looking for is a really nice texture that you can actually feel the potatoes are nice and creamy almost actually. So. Okay, now to this I'm going to add our flour. So the flour, and again, everything's best mixed up in weight when it comes to dry ingredients, not volume, because flour, whether you sift it or don't sift it or pack it down, is very different. So I have 1.5 cups of white flour here that I'm going to incorporate in this as well, and do a little bit at a time. I don't want to move the dough around too much, so I'm not going to be like kneading this a lot. I just want to kind of get it mixed up and incorporated here, but I don't want it to be clumpy either, so I want to make sure that the flour finds its way through this particular mixture. Okay, it seems to be coming together very nicely. Okay. I'm going to try to make a bit of a well in the middle of this, now that I got this all kind of incorporated. What I have here is I have 1 large egg that I'm going to break into this bowl here. And then I've got another egg white that I need to incorporate in as well. Just based on the volume and the measures that I'm using, I needed to be able to just use 1 egg and 1 egg white. I wouldn't use a yolk because the yolk will provide more of a denser kind of texture to it. So I'm going to just grab my, we're just going to get this all mixed up really nicely here. Get this combined, get this whisked very nicely, make this very vigorous. I have to get my executive producer off camera to get a couple of these little utensils for me that I forgot to add. Okay, so in the well here, I'm just going to add the egg mixture. And I'm just going to blend this in. So I'm going to fold all this in, incorporate this all together. sure I got a little bit of flour on my hands here when I do this. Okay, so I think we have our dough in kind of a pretty good place right now. I just want to let this rest for about 10 minutes or so. Then we're going to come back and we're going to form our gnocchi. Okay, so we have our dough prepared now, and just a couple of recipe adjustments here I should call out. The dough was very, very wet, and I'm not sure whether that was because of the size of potatoes, the time of year, not really sure why, but it was very, very wet. So I started with about 150 grams of flour, a cup and a half. I probably ended up at the end using 300 grams or 3 cups of flour, so it was almost double the amount. So I would suggest starting maybe with 200 or 225 grams or maybe 2 cups of flour, and then go from there until you get, it's not wet, but it's not hard and dry either. Again, it's all feel. And secondly, I forgot to mention, we have to sprinkle in some salt and some white pepper just to be able to add some flavor to this. So I did that as I was kind of remixing the flour up as well. Okay, now we're ready to make our gnocchis. So I'm going to just cut a piece of this off here, the dough. I'm going to set the rest aside, and I'm going to start rolling this out as a kind of a rope. I want to get it to a consistency of a rope. You know, if you put too much flour, it'll tend to slide around, but we just want to make sure that we can roll this out very nicely in a consistent way. Okay, we're getting a pretty good shape right there. I think I'm happy with that, the way it is. I'm just going to cut this in half, set one side aside, and all I'm going to do now, I'm just going to cut these into, maybe on a little bit of dough here, I'm going to cut these into about 1-inch pieces. I don't want them too big, also don't want them too small as well. So about 1-inch pieces, very nicely. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good right there. Now I'm going to introduce a family heirloom. It's another gadget that we have hanging around the kitchen here. And this is called a gnocchi board. And the gnocchi board really has these grooves that have been cut into this. This is actually my uncle made this board, and it's been in the family for a long time, as this pastry board has been as well. So all you do is you take a gnocchi and then you put it on the gnocchi board, and then start with your finger, roll it down, pressing fairly firmly, and then leave an indentation on the bottom as well. And what this does is this provides a ridge on the gnocchi, as well as a little bit of an indentation in the back. And what this is for is this really helps the sauce stick to the pasta after we boil these up and put them in with the sauce. So that's why we do that. So we're going to set those aside. I'll just try one more here, give that a go, roll it down, put the indentation of the finger. You can see the beautiful ridges on the side, and you can see the indentation side here. Okay, so I'm probably going to do about another 120 of these, so we're going to take this off camera, and we'll come back to you when it's time to make our butternut squash porcini and sage sauce. Okay, so we used about half our dough, and it looks like we made, first off in the batch, about half the dough. We made about 90 of these beautiful gnocchi. So I think we're going to have enough to be able to have at least another meal. So that looks like a fantastic portion for tonight. We're going to see just how hungry we are and how much we'll have remaining afterwards. Okay, so the gnocchi is made for tonight's dinner, and now we're off to make our sauce. Okay, so we're ready to prepare our sauce, at least actually prep the sauce. So we already roasted off this beautiful butternut squash, very sweet flavor profile to it. So I'm going to scoop this out in a minute. And then also we have some porcini mushrooms that we've gone ahead to rehydrate. So we're going to actually chop the porcini mushrooms, reserve the liquid, include that in our cooking of the butternut squash sauce. Then we have these amazing sage leaves. So we have an herb garden, actually quite an extensive herb garden that we have every year. And these sage leaves we harvest in the fall. We put them in a freezer bag and freeze them. We take them out when we need it. So we're going to chop up some fresh sage as well. And then also we went ahead and roasted off some garlic so we can actually have some nice soft garlic, and we're going to mix everything in together. So those are the ingredients for the butternut squash primarily. So first of all, what we want to do is we want to bring the butternut squash back. And I'm going to start the clear, kind of take this out, scoop this out of its skin. There's many ways of being able to do that. Some people say you should just, I'm just going to put this in a bowl here. Some say that you should get rid of the skin first and then cut this up, dice it up, put it in the oven. There's really no one correct method to do this, other than it's been in the oven at about 400 degrees for the better part of an hour and a half or so. Because what we want to be able to do is get this to be a really nice, texture. So we have one half almost done here. Be careful not to include the skins, but get the nice, beautiful meat of this butternut squash into this bowl here. Okay, so I think one's pretty much done there. I'll take that off to the side. Now I'm gonna just go ahead and work on the second one. Okay, so butternut squash is done. Okay, so we've got this butternut squash all taken out of the skin. I mentioned earlier, there's no really one correct way of being able to actually roast the butternut squash. I prefer to do it in the skin. I find it actually retains a lot more of the flavor when you do it in the skin, as opposed to either boiling it or roasting it in the pan without the skin. But that's just personal preference. So butternut squash is kind of all done right now. Now we're going to move on to the porcini mushrooms. So as I said earlier, we rehydrated these. So simply all I do with the porcinis is I just take them out, give them a bit of a squeeze. You don't want all the liquid here. We're going to retain the liquid off to the side and put them on our cutting board here. And give them a nice kind of fairly fine chop to them. You know, we don't want to be biting into, they're very, very flavorful. There's such a nice kind of earthy kind of flavor to these porcinis. It's just really quite amazing. So I want to make sure that it gets blended very nicely into our butternut squash dish here. So I'm just going to chop this up, get a kind of a very nice fine chop on them. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to go ahead and put that in with the butternut squash as well. Okay, very nice. Next up is our garlic. So I'm going to take our garlic here, which we roasted in the oven. Let's put this down here as well. Again, I don't really want to, I just want to chop this up, kind of get a fine chop on it. Otherwise you get clumps of garlic that are kind of isolated in certain parts of the dish, which you don't want to have happen. So got this as well. Let's get, again, just going to do a nice fine chop to this. Okay, excellent. So just going to scrape that up here as well. Going to move that all around in this bowl of butternut squash and porcini. And the last thing I need to prepare is our sage leaves. So I've got about 4 good-sized sage leaves here. I just want to make sure the stems come off them. That's not edible. What I want to do is just kind of slice these very nicely here. Again, we don't want any particular flavor to be able to come through. It's a combination of these flavors that's so sensational about this dish. So just going to make sure I get this chopped up here nicely. If you don't have fresh sage, you can go ahead and use dried sage if that's all you can find. But many of the grocers carry the fresh sage year-round as well. Okay, so going to go ahead and move this all around, put this in with the mix as well. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just bring this whole mixture here. I want to somewhat blend it up with the spoon a little bit, just to make sure that all the flavors kind of get mixed up in here a little bit. But as you can see, the squash is still quite chunky, even though it's been roasted for about an hour and a half in the oven. So to be able to meld these, I'm going to take a pastry blender actually. You can use a potato masher as well. This just seems to work well with a round bowl. I'm just going to try to mix this up a little bit, just to break down the squash and kind of get the flavors all mixed up as well. So I'm just going to do this for a minute or so, just before we get going to prepare our sauce with this mixture. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. We don't want it to blend it. You can blend this if you want to be more of a pureed sauce. I kind of like the rustic version of it. This is, well, Dorothy and I were introduced to this particular sauce in southern Italy, so we prefer it kind of be more rustic. Okay, so I think we're good right now. All the prep for our sauce is ready. Now we're ready to go to the stovetop. Okay, so now that we've done our preparation of our butternut squash sauce, I'm just going to warm up a pan here really nice. This is not about frying, it's really about warming and getting all the flavors together. So I'm going to put a little drizzle of olive oil in the bottom of this. Then I'm going to take the butternut squash mixture that we just prepared, and I'm going to actually put that into the pan. Looks amazing. Okay, perfect. Now what I want to do is I'm going to take some of this porcini liquid that we retained here when we actually made we rehydrated the porcini mushrooms. I'm going to start just incorporate this liquid in here. This does two things. Number one, it gets the butternut squash to be more of a sauce than just this kind of thick concoction of butternut squash that's been mashed up. So it adds a little bit of liquid in here as well. We may actually add a little more water afterwards as well, just depending on how this all works out. But just coming together really nicely here. As this mixes here, I'm going to just season it up with some salt and pepper as well. Looking very nice. I call this liquid gold because sometimes we make porcini with the risotto with porcini mushroom, and if we don't use all of this, it's liquid gold. Just keep this in the refrigerator. You can use this in your sauces or stews, in a soup as well. It's just the earthiness of the porcini mushrooms is really quite incredible. This is coming together really, really nicely. And we're not looking for a runny sauce here, but you know, it is a rustic dish hailing from southern Italy, where they cook much more rustic. When Dorothy and I had the opportunity to spend time in Italy, we drove from Calabria north to Rome, and as you can go north further, the food just becomes a little more refined along the way. So, but nothing like a nice rustic dish like this. Okay, now the last ingredient I'm going to add is going to add a little bit of cooking cream to this, just to be able to give a little bit more of a creamy texture and a smoothness to it. Brings it more to be like a sauce. So I'm going to just, about 1/3 of a cup is what I'm using right here. So ingredient wise, we used about 14 grams of the porcini mushrooms, 1 whole butternut squash, 4 to 5 sage leaves, and then the 3 cloves of garlic that we roasted into the oven. The rest of that in here. Looking really, really good. Okay, so I think our sauce is just about ready. So I'm just going to go ahead and cover this because we don't want this to dry out. And then I'm going to get ready to get our gnocchi into the boiling water that's been pre-boiling here for a little bit of time. And then we should be just about ready for dinner. Okay, sauce is done. Okay, so our wine pairing for tonight. The cellar's getting a little bit light. We've got to wait for our shipment from wineonline.ca to come in. But tonight we picked a 2015 Valpolicella Ripasso, Classical Superior. It's from the house of Monte del Fra, which is in the Veneto region of Italy. The 2 varietals in this wine are Corvina as well as Rondinella. That's the 2 great varietals that are in here. So we chose this wine out of what we have in the cellar for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is a medium bodied wine, so we don't have anything kind of meaty or gamey tonight, but we do have some earthiness of the porcini mushroom. But also we want to make sure we respect the sweetness of the butternut squash. So there is a bit of tar and a kind of ripe fruit, but balanced with some freshness in this wine. So it's best described, I'll call it more of a polished and velvety wine. So tonight our 2015 Valpolicella Ripasso is our selection. Now it's time to prepare the meal. Okay, so we have a nice large pot of boiling water that I salted, coming up to a nice rumbling boil. So we're going to go ahead and put our gnocchi into the boiling water. So just being careful that they don't clump up or they don't stick together. Okay, all the gnocchi are in the boiling water right now. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a shake in the bottom just to make sure that nothing really gets stuck together. I'm just going to bring this up to boil really quick and give you a little tip in terms of how these, how we know when the gnocchi are ready. So anyway, so we're just going to hang tight here for a couple seconds. Okay, so how do we know the gnocchi is ready? Well, they tell us when they're ready. So the gnocchi just float to the surface very nicely. So what I'm going to do now is going to take these out. So we have a pan here with a little bit of oil on it, just adjacent. We don't want to cook these too long. Just going to put these inside the pan here nice as they come up. Oh, these are looking absolutely amazing. They puff up a little bit, of course. We don't want to overcook them because then they turn like hockey pucks after, and you want to have a nice bite to them, but you want to have them like little air pillows as well. So I think they've all come up here, which is very, very nice. So this is coming up to heat right now. Just going to go ahead and turn the fire off on that burner there. I'm going to ladle just a little bit of pasta water into this mix as well. Pasta water is always good because it helps, the starchiness from the water actually helps to bind the whatever sauce you have in the pan to the pasta as well. So in addition to these beautiful little creases we made along the pasta as well, that's going to help the pasta water is going to help as well. So now we have our butternut squash mixture that we made a little while ago. I'm going to go ahead and start spooning some of that in to the gnocchi. Oh, if you can smell this, it's really delectable. Okay, be great. We're going to let this cook down a little bit, make sure that the pasta water evaporates a fair bit. Get that all boiled off. It's coming together really nicely. Dorothy prepared a very nice simple salad to complement this meal. There's a lot of richness in this particular dish with the porcini mushroom, the sweetness of the butternut squash. So a very simple salad. Again, a very rustic meal for us tonight. Just a simple romaine lettuce with some arugula, some white vinegar, some better quality olive oil, salt and pepper, and that'll be it. So I think this is coming up very nicely. Oh, looks absolutely amazing. I'm sure it's going to taste great. So I think this is all done, and now we're ready to plate. Okay, we're ready to plate this amazing rustic dish. So the plating on this is as straightforward as you could possibly get. So a nice helping right in the center of the plate of these homemade potato gnocchi. I think that's a very good portion right there. It's Kevin's portion, so I'm going to actually throw a couple more in there because we know how much he loves his pasta. Okay, perfect. And then what I'm going to do is I've got some Parmigiano Reggiano, so I'm just going to grate that fresh right on top of this. Ah, the cheese is absolutely fantastic on any pasta. Actually, I like my cheese even on my seafood pasta, and I know that's kind of against some law somewhere, but actually it's very good as well. And just for a little bit of freshness on the end, I'm going to add just a little bit of fresh parsley that we cut, just to put it on the top. A little bit of color, a little bit of freshness to the dish as well. Okay, so there you have it. We have a homemade potato gnocchi done with a butternut squash, porcini, and sage sauce with parsley on top with some Parmigiano Reggiano cheese with a simple salad on the side. Tonight's meal is finished. We're hungry.